Next, from Chicago, Rich Miller, publisher of the Capitol Facts blog, takes questions at the City Club of Chicago about the ongoing budget negotiations, the push for tax reform, and what to expect in the 2018 state elections. This runs about 25 minutes.
Can a state budget be successfully negotiated if you can't trust the person you are negotiating with or against?
No. Next. Let me expound on that. I don't think that either side trusts anybody. Okay. I don't think the Madigan people trust the Rauner people. I don't think the Rauner people trust the Madigan people, and I think everybody's got good reasons for that. And if you just want a refresher, rewind my speech to what happened last week.
Okay, this is from Bird Hoffman. Bird, where are you?
In the back.
In the back, okay. Affiliation Castlewood Homes. When will the legislature quit talking about a tax increase to produce revenue, instead start pushing for a progressive income tax?
If there's one thing that this governor was elected on, it's to stop a progressive income tax, all right? So you would need 3/5 in both chambers, and right now there's no way to do that in the House without Republican votes to put this on a constitutional amendment on the ballot. And that's the only way we can get a progressive income tax legally is with a constitutional amendment, because the Constitution requires a flat tax. So there isn't the votes to do that, even without Rauner right now. But, you know, there's no way he wants that to happen, and neither do his wealthy associates. It's just the way it is. I don't see it happening now after Madigan lost those 4 seats, even before he lost those 4 seats, because they didn't put it on the ballot when Quinn was governor. What makes you think they'll do it now?
Jeff Riley with Riley Public Affairs. Do you have a sleeper issue for the General Assembly for 2017? He's looking for a dark horse.
Yeah, AT&T. They're hiring massive amounts of lobbyists, so their statute that governs them expires, and they've been sunsets, and they've been trying to get some big changes for years, and so AT&T will be the corporate fight for the foreseeable corporate fight for next year. I don't know who their opponents are going to be yet, but I'm sure there will be, and they'll be advertising at capitalfacts.com. That's all I know for sure.
Okay, this is from Don Schellenberger, who's with Baird and Warner. Don, where are you? Okay, towards the rear there, City Club member. He wants to know if it's true that many of the Democratic members of the Illinois House are more fearful of Mr. Madigan than they are of their own constituents. Furthermore, isn't the problem the Speaker and not the Governor?
A member of the Tribune editorial board heard from. It's not as simple as that. It's just not as simple. Some of them are afraid of Madigan. Sure. A lot of Republicans are also afraid of the governor. All right? Fear is part of leadership. Or do they fear them more than they fear their constituents? What have they voted on so far that they have to fear from their constituents? Maybe the Exelon bailout. Madigan didn't even vote on that bill. Yeah, I guess you could say that in a way. On some things they do, because they're dependent on the Speaker, and they're dependent upon the governor as well. To say that they fear the governor or they fear the Speaker more than their own constituents is a pretty general blanket term, because they can always get challenged in a primary, no matter how good their general election prospects are. So they have to keep an eye on those constituents, and they have to work for them. And at the same time, they have a responsibility and they have ambitions on their own, right? You want a good committee assignment. You want to maybe work through, get into leadership. You want your bills to get favorable committee assignments, what have you. So yeah, there is definitely some of that fear. But we don't live in a cartoon, people, okay? It is not nearly as binary or as black and white or what have you as is often portrayed. Now, candidates, I forgive for portraying things like that because it works as a means of communication and persuasion. I do not give the same break to people who write about politics. Put a little thought into it a little bit more and present a more nuanced view because we do not live in a cartoon. And you can convince yourself of that, but you're going to be wrong. And you're just eating slop. There are problems on both sides of this. And the people who supposedly are thoughtful opinion leaders in this state are way too often, not always, but way too often, they are knee-jerk reactionaries. And it's time we really ended that.
Good answer, Rich. Okay. This is from my wife, so we have to ask the question. My wife of 51 years, Myrna here. Some were pretty good, weren't they, babes? I'm in deep doo-doo now. Okay. Will a Democratic candidate who is a billionaire run the same type of campaign as did Governor Rauner, or will that person appeal to the base Democrat?
I don't know. We'll see. I don't even know if there's any speeches by J.B. Pritzker that we could, analyze at this point. I haven't gotten that far to look for them on YouTube, but maybe Z is shaking his head yes, so apparently, yeah. It's the Oppo guy right there. So I guess we're going to find out. Check the blog in a few days. There's almost half the Democratic Party voted for Bernie Sanders earlier this year. And Pritzker was a very strong Hillary Clinton supporter. And so there will be, as I wrote in my column this week, there will be an attempt, I think, to highlight that and to help the Democrats divide their own party. It's just going to depend on if he hires smart people, capable people, and if he's got thick enough skin to just power through and stick to his own message when they're coming at him from all different directions. He's a second-time candidate. His first campaign in the 90s didn't go well at all. But, he made a lot of mistakes, and I think he believes he's learned from them. So we'll see. Being a billionaire has its advantages. I wouldn't know this personally. I'm just guessing. One advantage that you certainly have is you can write checks, large checks. Look at what the governor has been doing. So will he write those checks? That was the big question about Bruce Rauner, right? Always two questions about rich guys. Will they really write the check? And will they hire people who are smarter than them and then listen to them? Rauner did both. Not as far as governing, but Rauner did both on the campaign. And that's one reason why he was so successful. He stuck to his message. He had a bunch of cutthroats out there, and he also drew a pretty weak incumbent in a good Republican year. So we'll see. I mean, I don't know. It's, it's December of 2016, and a lot of people in this room have still not completely processed the last election that we just had. I know there was one sitting at my table, and so there's a long way to go and a lot of opportunities to make mistakes over the next 15 months. So it's going to be entertaining if nothing else.
Great. This is a question from your buddy, Alderman Hopkins. He just lost one of his colleagues, and he wants to know if you have any advice for Susana Mendoza, the new state comptroller, former soccer star at Bolingbrook High School.
I thought you were you were talking about Cochran on that. I guess he's not lost yet. Pinched, not lost. I don't know. One thing that I would suggest is that she stop talking about former staff the way she's talking about former staff. It's starting to tick me off. That would be it.
As a follow-up, did you think that contest would end as it did, or did you think that the opponent of Susana might be victorious?
Hillary won by 16 points, I think. Duckworth won by 15, I think. In an environment like that, running statewide, it's really hard to overcome those headwinds. They did a pretty good job. She was a lot closer. That race was a whole lot closer than the other two statewide races. But man, when you can only overcome so much of that headwind, and then it just carries you off. And that's really what happened there. If that race had been a 10-point race at the top, then you would have seen something like maybe the Treasurer's race a couple of years ago, where it was really, really close.
Okay, this is a question from Elizabeth Austin. Elizabeth, where are you? Right down here in front of us. We are one or two state legislatures away from having enough GOP control of state houses. That was hard to read. Control of state houses to call a U.S. Constitutional Convention. Do you expect that to be an issue in 2018?
Yeah, I would assume so. I think, having Obama as president really masked a lot of problems for Democrats that they didn't notice until after Clinton lost. And you got like 13 General Assemblies that the Democrats control. Rauner refers to this as Democratic Lunch Group, right? So I'm using the royal you. 13. And the Republicans control Minnesota's General Assembly. Minnesota, which most people thought was a fairly liberal state. They got a pretty liberal governor up there, and it just raised taxes and on the wealthy, by the way. But now they've got a completely Republican-controlled General Assembly. Things are getting hairy for the Democrats, and there's not been this sort of one-party control in a very long time by the Republicans since the 20s. And so, yeah, I think this is going to pick up steam. I think there's some attempts to try to say, oh, we can keep a convention down to one or two issues. But I think, you get people in a convention and they're empowered to do whatever they want. You still then have to vote on a constitution after that's done. But, the party under Obama collapsed at the local level, except in big cities like this one. Otherwise, it's collapsed. It's almost non-existent in some states. And they're fighting over the DNC, and that's fine, I guess. But how about, the counties, downstate, the suburbia? They you know, in this state, you got Madigan and Cullerton who drew a map and who are also very good at what they do. But that's not the case in most other states. And it might not be the case here if the governor has his way. So, you know, he might end up drawing the map if he gets reelected. 50-50 shot. So, yeah, I think this is going to become an important issue, and it's going to get people thinking for a change about what could actually happen, and we'll see how it turns out. I mean, a constitutional convention would be, man, that would be something. That would sure be something to watch. And the Democratic Party, the advantage that they have being in such a minority right now, nationally, is that the Republicans can no longer blame them for anything outside of Illinois. Maybe they'll just blame the whole thing on Madigan and be done with it. That might not be, you know, that might be the next step. I don't know.
Okay, very good. This is from Warren Ribley. Warren, where are you? Right over here. Okay. This is an interesting question. When, if ever, will Trump's Twitter account be shut down?
I don't know. That's national, man. I don't know. Ask him. I don't think ever.
Okay. This is from Garrick Bell. It's kind of an involved question. Garrick, where are you? Way in the back. This is about opium. An opium epidemic was a major factor in the downfall of the Chinese hegemony. Now the U.S. and Illinois specifically have a heroin opioid epidemic that's out of control. A lack of economic opportunity is a major factor in triggering drug abuse. Now he gets to the question. Do our elected officials recognize that the economic climate is tied to the political environment and that the status quo is destroying people's lives? That's heavy.
Yeah, it's a real heavy question, and it comes in several parts. Part of the problem with the whole opioids epidemic is we allowed a few national drug companies to flood the market. And they turned people into junkies, who then, when they couldn't get refills, went on the street. Because a heroin dealer ain't going to check your prescription or your ID. So, you know, that's a real complicated issue. There has been some legislation here in Illinois to deal with this. I would suggest that it goes further. I think just on the treatment angle, you know, there's a medical marijuana clinic in Springfield that actually advertises, get yourself off opioids and get yourself on weed. They don't really say it that way, but it's deal with pain in a way that's not going to destroy your life. You just make the pizza delivery guy a little happier. I keep, you know, seeing in national media denying that there is a problem among the white working class, and forget about the black working class. They never even write about them. You know, oh no, we've never written about the white working class. Yeah, did you ever once write a story about the troubles facing the black working class or the Mexican working class or any working class? No. I actually saw a story from the New York Times, a column. A guy went down to a Subway, not a Subway, a Subway restaurant. No, it was a Dunkin' Donuts. It was a Dunkin' Donuts. Guy goes to a Dunkin' Donuts and filed a column from the Dunkin' Donuts, as if he had talked to real people. There are real problems out there. I was born in Kankakee, which is a shell of its former self. I was raised in Iroquois County, which is still, you know, the farms then were a lot smaller than they are today, providing fewer families with incomes. One family where 10 used to be. You go to Watseka, which is the county seat, which used to be vibrant with industry, and it's also a shell of its former self. Biggest employer is probably the Walmart on the outskirts of town. Yes, there are real problems, and yes, the opioid epidemic does also play into this because it allows people to self-medicate because their lives suck, and they don't want to leave their families and their friends and go to another state. But often that happens in Illinois. There are people who say we don't want to become another Indiana, right? Rauner's trying to make us into Indiana. You know, if you go talk to people where I'm from, they got a lot of relatives who live in Indiana and work in Indiana, who left Illinois. So, man, I don't want to destroy labor either. There's just got to be a way that we can address this situation. The cities is where the population has been going. It is where, except for the south and west sides of this city, it is where the real economic growth is happening in this state and really in the nation. Cook County is a huge driver of new businesses, of new jobs, what have you. But the rest of it is rusting. And, you know, in the meantime, we're disinvesting from universities that are downstate, allowing universities that had kind of decayed over the years to get even worse. And that shouldn't be allowed to happen. If we want to help downstate, then we need one thing. The first thing we need to do, because it's the easiest thing, is we need to put money into downstate higher education and revitalize these schools. Anyway, I'm off my soapbox on that.
Just two questions left, Rich. One is, if Speaker Madigan were to step down, who might challenge him, and would you foresee battles between the Black Caucus, the Hispanic Latino Caucus, all of the other caucuses?
Yeah, well, we'll figure that out when that happens. I have, you know, despite my funny little suggestion at the end of the speech, I have often said that Mike Madigan will sponsor my death resolution in the Illinois House. Although after the speech, he might decline to do that. But he'll still be around for the vote, I think. So, and that's not to say, you know, my health is actually, after the, you know, little surgery a year ago, is pretty darn good. But I just don't see that happening yet. I just don't. And so it'd be silly to even talk about it. He has not groomed a successor. The closest that you might even possibly get to that would be John Bradley, and he just got his clock cleaned in Southern Illinois. So much for that. But I don't even think he was really grooming Bradley for a speaker's job, maybe majority leader, but those days are over. Next question.